there's nowhere left to go. Nowhere. Except the Oasis.
Ready Player One is finally getting a follow-up movie with Ready Player Two moving forward. And that alone is a big deal because the first film turned into a massive hit both financially and culturally. It made over $600 million worldwide, and it connected with audiences who enjoyed its mix of gaming, pop culture throwbacks, and big adventure stakes. So a second movie happening isn't surprising, even though it took a while to gain real momentum. But there's also a cloud hanging over it because Steven Spielberg, who directed the first movie, is only set to produce this time. That matters more than it might seem at first, since there's a long-standing pattern where sequels to Spielberg-directed films tend to struggle when he doesn't return to direct them himself. The second movie is based on Ernest Cline's sequel novel, Ready Player Two, and fans have been wondering for years if it would ever get adapted. Now that it's officially in development, the focus shifts from will it happen to how will it turn out. Because although the first movie worked well as a spectacle and a crowd pleaser, the second book didn't land nearly as strongly with readers. It received a lot more criticism, so that creates a challenge right away. But movie adaptations don't have to follow books exactly, and that could actually help here. The first film already made a bunch of changes from its source material, and that flexibility could be the key reason the second movie might still succeed even though the book response was rough. The big concern people keep bringing up is the so-called Spielberg sequel pattern. Over the past several decades, a bunch of franchises that Spielberg started or directed had follow-up films made by other directors, and the results were mixed at best. You can see it with Jaws, where each sequel reviewed worse than the last. It also shows up with Jurassic Park follow-ups and the later Indiana Jones installment that Spielberg didn't direct. Some of those movies made money, but critical reception often dropped, and fans felt something was missing. Because Spielberg has such a specific storytelling style and emotional touch, his absence behind the camera can be felt, even though he's still involved as a producer. That's why Ready Player Two faces extra pressure. Even though Spielberg is still attached, producing is not the same as directing. A producer helps guide the project, but the director shapes the moment-to-moment experience. Tone, pacing, performances, and visual energy all depend heavily on who sits in the director's chair. So if someone else takes over, the sequel will need a very strong creative vision to keep the same sense of wonder and fun that helped the first movie stand out. Still, there are reasons to be optimistic about the second movie happening and working. One major advantage is that Ready Player One already proved the concept can translate well to the screen. The mix of virtual worlds, high-stakes quests, and pop culture puzzles clearly works in a cinematic format. Even though the first book had mixed reviews, the film version improved the structure and made the emotional arcs clearer and more accessible. So it's reasonable to think the same approach could be used again. If the Ready Player Two movie keeps the core ideas but reshapes the story, tightens the character journeys, and adjusts the more divisive elements, it could outperform its source material just like the first film did. The ending of Ready Player One also sets up strong thematic material to continue, because Wade's victory was never just about winning a game. After collecting the 3 keys and reaching the final chamber, he's offered control of the Oasis through a contract. It looks like a simple win, but it's actually a moral test. Because Halliday makes mistakes by letting his creation replace real human connection, Wade has to prove he understands that lesson. He refuses to sign immediately, and that choice shows growth. So when he finally receives the real Easter egg, it represents more than success, it represents maturity and balance between the virtual and real worlds. That theme carries directly into sequel territory. Because Wade now controls the Oasis along with the High Five, the question becomes what they do with that power. At the end of the first movie, they decide to limit Oasis access on certain days so people are pushed to reconnect in real life. That decision alone opens up a bunch of directions for a second movie, since not everyone would agree with that rule. Some people depend on the Oasis emotionally and economically, so conflict is almost guaranteed. A sequel can build on that tension and show the consequences of trying to regulate a digital universe that billions rely on. The fate of IOI also gives the sequel strong footing. The company tried to take over the Oasis through manipulation and violence, and Sorrento's actions led to his downfall. Wade blocks IOI's loyalty centers from accessing the system, which basically cripples one of their biggest operations. Although the movie doesn't fully spell out the company's collapse, there's enough there to continue the corporate conflict. Because giant companies rarely disappear quietly, a second film could show a rebranded or rebuilt threat trying a different strategy to regain control. Another thread that becomes even more important for a sequel is Halliday himself. At the end of the first film, his digital presence inside the OASIS feels more advanced than a normal programmed character. Wade even questions whether Halliday is truly gone. That mystery connects directly to the Ready Player 2 book's reveal that Halliday created technology to upload a human mind into the OASIS, allowing a digital version of himself to live on. Even though the movie didn't fully confirm that yet, it planted enough hints that the sequel can explore it in a bigger way. That idea of a human consciousness living forever in virtual space raises the stakes and shifts the story into more intense sci-fi territory. The world of Ready Player One also works as a warning about corporate nostalgia and digital escape, and that message can grow in the sequel because the problem isn't solved just because Wade won. The real world is still overcrowded, unequal, and full of aggressive advertising. People still hide inside the OASIS because reality is hard. Although nostalgia and pop culture references are everywhere in the story, they aren't just there for decoration. They show how easily love for old media can be turned into a product and a control tool when corporations take over. A second movie can push that commentary further, especially if new technology inside the OASIS becomes even more immersive and addictive. That connects to one of the deeper messages behind the Easter eggs and references. Some critics say the constant callbacks are just audience bait, but the story keeps pointing toward balance instead of obsession. Enjoying games, movies, and virtual adventures is fine, but losing yourself completely is dangerous. Because Wade learns to value real relationships alongside digital achievements, his arc gives the sequel a strong emotional base. Even though Ready Player 2, the book, makes his journey darker and more unstable, the movie version can reshape that path into something more uplifting and cohesive. There are also fun details from the first movie that show how layered the storytelling already was, like the hidden musical Easter egg in the OASIS theme. The composer slipped Latin lyrics into the score that translate to a message about finding the Easter egg, which means clues were hidden not just visually, but sonically. That kind of creativity is exactly what fans expect more of in a second movie. Expanding that puzzle box style across new challenges would help the sequel feel fresh instead of repetitive. If the filmmakers lean into what worked before, take smart liberties with the source material, and keep the emotional core about connection over escapism, the second movie has a solid chance to break the old sequel pattern and stand on its own. And that's that for today's video, folks. Thank you so much for watching our video today, and we will see you in the next one.